Hello everybody. I'm trying to record this video on my own and have a lot of problems. I think I battled it for a few hours. However, I'll try to be composed and remember tranquility and let we go. The title of this video is Now I Do, Now I Don't. It's inspired by the Princess Harris interview with various people, and it's inspired by the thought on recovery. So I thought that I will give you some understanding of recovery, what is not recovery, in the situation where there are programs to be made on, so to speak, mental health and various interviews which already Prince Harry had. This is my private view, that nothing to do with the fact that I'm a therapist. My personal view on recovery, our recovery, 12 steps, and Prince Harry's kind of attempt, I believe, at recovery. At the beginning, let me just read something which I always quote, and this is the quote from this wonderful book, a huge book, and it's on the words. Unfortunately, we do not recognize the empty nature of words, and we become fixated on them as if they were something real. This is why pleasant words make us happy, and unpleasant words make us unhappy or angry. This reaction is a sign that we believe in reality of words, or reality of emotions, so to speak. And that is exactly what happens here. The words which were produced in interview with Oprah and also in the interview with somebody else. And the words which Prince Harry produced are quite alarming, because they suggest that he has no idea mostly what he's actually putting herself into it. Let me just quote some thought at the beginning, which I always loved it. Learn to appreciate what you have before time makes you appreciate what you have. And maybe that is the message to all of us who at the beginning of recovery, or my colleagues or counselors, would encourage people in early recovery from addiction of all sorts to go and blame the parents, blame the past, and go into the game of blaming, not appreciating that actually blame makes us victim, it makes us not to be responsible, and it actually is completely useless. In my almost 40 years of practice, I have never once encouraged anyone to just go and beat the hell out of parents, or move, or talk about things which are probably take a good expert on genetics or psychiatrist or experienced therapist or counselors to talk about it. But this kind of self-indulgence bubbles are not very useful and actually create confusion and show confusion. In a sense, it's not very useful to use that kind of mask or glory of early recovery and bubble through without any reflection or any integration of what you know. That's why I titled this talk, Now I Know, Now I Don't, because we feel or we believe we know, but actually we know very little. And you pay attention that people who have integrity, they usually measure their words very carefully, because they know they have to stand by it. They know they have to deliver. That's the integrity. If you just learn something and you just become expert after 2 days or 2 months, or be it 2 years, on some complexity of growth or transformation or healing, that you make a fool of yourself. So as the addiction has got different stages, so does recovery. And that's what we need to remember. Recovery, it's a process, Any recovery, it's a process. It's a breaking of the denial, it's intellectual learning, full of words, yes, and then recognizing the difference between feeling, emotions, and probably go to spirit and learn to integrate learn to forgive, learn to have empathy, and above all, learn to contain and respect and honor those who were before us, and that includes our parents, grandparents. As we're all broken, as humanity is broken, as we all have problems, we're not here to really glorify our pain, as we all in pain. Humanity is in pain. I have listened and experienced enough to know that there is no one who can be spared. It's not about the pain, it's not about the hurt, it's how we deal with it. And this kind of, dare I say, Americanized in a very negative, shady way, sort of glorification of tears and emotions and it's not very good. It's not very good. When you really, truly internalize and reflect what's going on, you probably be quiet to the best, if not shut up altogether. So it's dangerous to say that Prince Harry is expert on mental disorder. As a trustee, as a protector, as a patron, yes, but I dare say Harry is not a therapist or indeed a counselor or anybody like that. And just to talk about the pain, the way he does, so many countless amount of people doing early recovery, kind of honeymoon time, is not useful whatsoever. It really is not. It's actually why the 12-step movement is so powerful, and Oprah does not discover anything new. It's been going on for quite a while, and millions of people benefit from it. And why it works so well? Because it's anonymous, because it's contained, because it's protected. Why the therapy works? The therapy is about containment. It's about vessel in the vessel. It's about security. It's about safety. It's not about bubbling through in the forum about, it's like going to the loo and relieve yourself and remembering that maybe tomorrow you will feel like doing it again. It's a temporary measure. It's what children do, what teenagers do as a reaction. I sometimes thought, that when Prince Harry and his dear wife was living in England, that they were behaving like two teenagers who sort of escaped from parents. And I dare say that there is an element of that in this La La Land, as everybody say, that them glorifying that their sort of understanding of life and pain and sorrow is really so good, and humane behavior and service of humanity. I'm very suspicious on all that. Mental health is a serious stuff, and of course, mental health needs to be understood what it means. Emotional whining or emotional exposure of our pain has got nothing to do with mental health. It's to do with immaturity, to do with being a teenager, to do with misunderstanding. Of course, we all believe, that when we laugh or when we start talking, that we all will be healed immediately, and that we will, our wounds, in the same sense what Prince Harry said, that he's not going to make the mistakes his parents make or whatever. We'll make mistakes. I am mistake on two legs. Genetically speaking, past generation, it takes 6 generations to mess us up and 3 to repair it. So steady on, Prince Harry, steady on. You'll be surprised that when your children grow up, how much they will tell you what many mistakes you made. Unavoidable. As a reaction, we are better parents indeed. But in a psychic sense, real sense, we may repeat the patterns. All of us do for various reasons. It's like sucker toast. We have personal consciousness and family consciousness and religious consciousness and cultural consciousness and class consciousness, country consciousness, the time we are born. This is a complex thing. And we need to have a bit of time to reflect before we give ourselves authority to speak on the subject, which we know very little about, To share the emotions is childish, you know. You share it in 12-step meeting or in therapy. Otherwise, we should shut up. It's not good. It's a sort of a narcissistic gain. You know, it's not really containing. It's not loving towards oneself. It's not respectful in any shape or form, and it's not recovery. It's not recovery. That's why we have sponsors and therapists or psychiatrists or people who know what they're talking about. They've been trained for many years, you know, to be a good therapist. It takes about 20 years. Not 2 months and not 2 weeks, God forbid. And even then, you sort of ask yourself, do I really know what's going on? Yeah, you have to have enormous amount of your own maturity, your own recovery. And it's a complex thing. So mental illnesses and programs, yes, good money in it, I'm sure it's a good money in it. But somehow I am wary of those experts. You know, as I always say to various people I know who may be a good photographers or know better, make better videos, I cannot claim that I am expert on it. You know, I'm not really. I'm hardly expert on myself. Occasionally, I hope to God I know what I'm talking about. And that's good enough, you see. I can be only good enough parents, good enough therapists, good enough doctors, good enough lovers, fathers, mothers. And if we are to look at the parents, we must look at both parents, Prince Harry. Both parents, your mother and father. 50% mother, 50% mother. And you know, we cannot idealize parents, because if we do, or make them condemn or criticize them only, it means that we are unrealistic and we will not be able to also recognize ourselves for who we are. So we need to really pay attention to that. So small knowledge, as I always say, in the hands of people who glorify that small knowledge, and rather unconscious people. Consciousness is something else. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. I met in my practice many experts who, after reading one book, become experts on this, that, and another. Taxi drivers who, after 2 weeks of training in hypnotherapy, be put on their doors that they're hypnotherapists. That is really dangerous, situation, and you can mess up lots of people. So it's good that we are paid to sort of have programs about mental situation and make money. But is it really useful to encourage people to come and cry and talk about their pain in the childhood? I doubt it. It's not useful. It's a nursery of therapy, nursery of maturity. At the best, the teenagers. Mature people do life slightly different. We cannot be expert on every subject. And, and mental health, it's a complex subject. So I suggest that we shut up. The parental input, like everybody else, is good and bad, yeah? But, if we react, if we do geographical escape, I did geographical escape. I took myself here to England. Little did I know, I've repeated everything. I promised myself not to. It took me a while to begin to see what the hell is going on. Sobriety stages, breaking the denial, recovery from maybe using whatever, drink, drugs, gambling, whatever. Treatments maybe. And it was difficult, it's difficult for famous people to go to treatments. Also, I've seen enough famous people in various treatment centers. And then maybe just a bit of reflective work and a bit of healing work, whatever it is, and emotional work. Maybe then, once we deal with emotions, actually we can grow spiritually. I remember Robert Lefevre talking about it, but many of my colleagues agree with that concept. Because otherwise our energy goes into reaction. Reactive, if you are a rebel, you are a people's pleaser. This is just the same side of, or the coin of the same side. Otherwise, you're just in a bubble, love bubble, recovery bubble, mental health bubble, you know, and telling how it was. Nasty. Maybe if we ask ourselves how were we and how did we affect those people we're supposed to love or respect, because that's taking responsibility. When we are victims, we abdicate responsibility. In any case, we cannot grow. It's not possible. Victims don't grow. They can glorify. You know, being a victim is the most powerful position. I have sent many victims to various treatment centers. I remember one lady in Meadow I sent, and they said, you know, Maya Parker, just take her back. We're done. We cannot cope with her. She's so attached to be a victim. There's nothing we can do. We cannot penetrate her. Victims can be very charming, sweet, or hysterical, attention-seeking. Being a victim, it's like a spiritual corrosion. It will never make us anything else, and certainly will not make us into an empowered human being. Otherwise, you know, we better be quiet. To talk about how, and this in this sweeping sentence that we talk about, you know, how our parents did us in, it is useless, really. When you know exactly what that means, you don't talk in that way. 6th generation, so 10th generation, some of my colleagues, it's a passion of mine, genetics. I studied genetics since I was 15, and I'm slightly older than 15, hopefully. And I can tell you that, you know, some geneticists would put it 10 generation, 5. You know, we're only beginning. If you start something, continue and be quiet, because it will take you a while, all of us. We have to sort of know what the truth is all about, yeah? And what freedom is all about. Escape to freedom. Escape to what? You cannot escape from yourself. I cannot escape from myself. That's a real recovery. Real recovery means that you quieter, you grieve a lot, you reflect a lot, you forgive a lot, and you shut up most of the time. Otherwise, what use of disclosure? What is the use of disclosure? Voyeuristic? Indulgent? You only disclose when it is of use to others in a very specific way. But that honeymoon applies to us all. It's a shallow understanding of recovery. It's a shallow understanding of life. It's a shallow, indulgent understanding. And it's no good to talk about things you know very little. Yes, you can talk about your stories. That's in contained way. Forum, you know, forum about stories. That's sort of 12-step meetings, yeah, that's a good forum. Publicly, I would not suggest Prince Harry continue that. And indeed, do not talk about things you know very little, because that's really is a kind of a place where fools come from. Genetics. Well, Harry, Prince Harry, maybe you can look at your mother as well. Your mother was very grand dame, but she was who she was, and it's time, if you really want to be sober, you put both parents into reflective position inside you. Otherwise, I don't know what sort of recovery Prince Harry is in, but definitely that's not a good recovery. Publicly acknowledge things like that. not good, not elegant. You have to find a meaning in your pain, not avoid pain. That's the transcending, Prince Harry, transcending activity of the psyche, of the soul, of the human spirit. We all suffer. That's what Christ consciousness is all about. How do you do that? That's where you find compassion. That's when you find forgiveness. That's when you find life as it should be lived. Of course, if you're a victim, you have sympathy rather than empathy. If you fish for sympathy, you'll get it, of course, especially in La La Land. Otherwise, it's common for early recovery, early learning to be glorifyingly authority on things which you have very little comprehension. So it's a reaction, not action. Reaction, it's a domain of teenagers. It's a domain of victims. It's a domain of children. It's not a domain of an adult. An adult must stop for a second and reflect and act. It's no good to be in love with your own voice, and to be in love with your own words, which may, just may, carry a power we have no idea about it. It's important to really know that we can stand and be counted, and we can really stand by our words. And also, that's where we learn to probably show some gratitude to our parents, to our ancestors, to past. Once we grieve, once we forgive, once we arrive at that. Because whatever you do, your Prince Harry grandmother, Her Majesty the Queen, it's an extremely generous woman when she's saying that grief is a price of pain of people you love. She's generous because she knows how to accept in gratitude. And as I always say, you can be anything in the world, just don't be ungrateful. Because it's mean and silly. And that's what I think happened. To attack, it's not to share. To share means you're quiet. Because real victims are perpetually in shock. They are in chaos, they are in crisis. That's what real victims are all about. They are the victims of gang rapes and abuse and wars. Real victims are very often unable to function, Prince Harry. They are not able to do interviews, that I can assure you of that. The solution is how we deal with that. So it's not about exactly displaying publicly our knickers, emotional knickers. Because victims need to revenge, and victims need to blame, and victims need to feel morally superior and seeking sympathy and devoid of responsibility and no reflection. So victimhood is like a spiritual suicide. It's no good. Because victims blame others for their lot. They look out for answer outside themselves. When you accept that maybe, just maybe, some things happened, you go inside. We deal with anger, we deal with grief, we become calmer. But there's no improvement if you have a mentality of victim. You won't be able to do that. So, if we want to go to meetings, if we're lucky and blessed to break the denial, there are places where we can go. Dr. Pembroke said that Prince Harry had too much therapy. I would tend to disagree with him. I believe that Prince Harry sadly had not enough proper approach to therapy and not enough good therapy. So that's sad, but here you are, that's how it goes. The healing, growth, it always starts with the spiritual understanding and not reaction. That's what it means. And we need to remember that. So it's not about my word or your word. There are three truths. There's always my truth, your truth, and the truth for all of us. And we must remember that. But it's important to know that we're not here to be perfect, so our parents are not perfect, and grandparents. And as I always say to people, you're paying me not to be perfect. And I always say to everybody, I'm not perfect, mother, sister, daughter, cousin, but at least I'm not a fake, and that's important. So let's say a Serenity Prayer, and this time it's a very funny Serenity Prayer. I find it somewhere, so I'll read it to you. God grant me the serenity to accept selfish, ungrateful people for who they are, and the courage to not become bitter, and the wisdom not to let it ever happen again. Bye for now.